First, welcome everybody on a beautiful day. We're glad you're here. I'm Dottie Head. I'm the Director of Communications for Georgia Audubon. I have a few upcoming events to tell you about. Our Georgia Bird Fest registration is going to open to current Georgia Audubon members this Tuesday, March 2nd at 10 a.m. We have more than 40 events, virtual events, workshops, and webinars as part of this month-long celebration of birds and birding. When I finish with the introductions, I'll post a link to the events in the chat box if you'd like to check it out. But we encourage you to join and take part in this fun month-long celebration. This Wednesday, March 2nd, we're going to be hosting a free webinar about the proposed Camden County Spaceport and its potential impacts on birds. The webinar will be at 7 p.m. It's free to register, and we're going to be joined by representatives from, of course, Georgia Audubon, the Georgia Conservancy, Manomet, and the Southern Environmental Law Center. We hope you'll join us for that event. Also, as part of this 3 billion exhibit, we are co-hosting a webinar with Brickworks Gallery entitled Liberation and Hope Through Black Art. We're excited that we're going to have Dr. J. Drew Lanham joining us to do a poetry reading from his new book, Sparrow Envy, and also Rashina Fountain and Isaiah Scott, a young artist. This event's going to be on Thursday, April 22nd at 7 p.m. and it's also a webinar. I'll post some registration information links in the chat box as well. Finally, we are recording this event and we'll make a recording available on our YouTube channel in a few days. So if you need to come back and show your friends, please check it out. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat box or the Q&A, and we'll do our best to get to them. We are asking that you save your questions until the end. We'll address them all at once at the end of the presentation. Finally, we've got closed captioning available on this webinar. You can click on the CC button on the toolbar at the bottom, and the captions should pop up for you to view. So now it's my great pleasure to introduce Laura Adams. Laura and Brickworks Gallery have been a big friend of Georgia Audubon over the years, and we've done a number of collaborative events. So we've been really delighted to participate in this event with her, this 3 billion exhibit. Laura is a collage artist whose work depicts the forests, wildlife, and wildflowers of the world. She concentrates her subject matter on the flora and fauna and birds that live in areas around her. An avid birder and hiker, Laura's work brings the viewer into the emotional and spiritual connection she feels in the presence of nature. The source material Adams uses for her collage includes found items from nature, textured papers, painted papers, and exotic patterned papers that have been cut up, layered, and adhered with acrylic medium. Often 10 or more layers of material are used to create a single work. The result is a painting with a distinct three-dimensional effect. Adams has shown her work in galleries and juried exhibitions around the United States. Her pieces are owned in a number of corporate collections as well as private collections around the world. So with that, I will turn it over to Laura.
Thank you so much, Dottie. Let me get set up. I'm gonna do my share screen. Did that work?
Not yet.
Okay. Oh, here. Okay.
There you go.
All right. So yes, welcome to the Hudgens Center for the Arts and the 3 billion exhibit. And thank you, Georgia Audubon, for inviting me to do this online presentation and for being a co-sponsor of the show. As you all know, this is an art show. I'm one of the artists in the show as well as the curator, and I have two of the artists with me. I'm going to introduce them more later in the program. And we also have a scientist with us, Wayne Sentman, and he's going to be doing a presentation that's related to some of the artwork as well. So this art exhibit is at the Hudgens Center for the Arts. It's located in the Infinite Energy Center up in Duluth. And if y'all have ever been up there, you know it's a big sprawling complex, and you can get a little lost back there. But if you look for this red brick building, or my signs pointing to the building, Or if you look for this little detention pond that's in front of the building, you'll find it. You might even see these little guys and have them greet you on the way. So this exhibit is called 3 billion. And it's an art show, which is a reference to a study that was published in the fall of 2019 in Science magazine, which found that over the last 50 years, North America has lost 1/3 of its native bird population, amounting to some 3 billion birds. These losses are across many different biomes of bird species. We have forest bird numbers that are down by 1/3. Grassland bird numbers are down over 50%. Aerial insectivores have declined by 1/3 as well, and other biomes are in decline. The primary cause of this loss is human-related habitat loss and other human-related conditions such as window collisions, plastic pollution, and overuse of pesticides. Now, if you're in the birding community, as many on this webinar are, you probably have heard about this news. It was front page news for birders. However, I have found that outside the birding community, hardly anybody knows about this problem. It was around this same period of time in 2019 that the Hudgens Center asked me to curate a show. I'm an artist as well as the curator of this show, and I wanted to put together something that I was very passionate about. As Dottie said, I'm an avid birder and hiker, and I'm also a long-term member of Georgia Audubon. And I've worked and created art in the environmental space for, oh gosh, it's been about 25 years now. I've found that art communicates in a different way than the spoken word. It can reach emotions and speak to people in ways that perhaps a scientist or advocate cannot. People often tell me about my work and how meanings are present in them that I wasn't even sure I meant to put in, but I am communicating in a different way. Having worked in the environmental art field for 25 years, I knew a number of other artists who were in this field and were as passionate about birds as I was. So I invited a few of these artists to join me and to create different exhibits for the show. So I and my fellow artists hope that this show brings some awareness to the plight of our North American bird species and offers some solutions and strategies for helping to fix the problems. We hope that this art inspires you to join us. So the first exhibit you get to is as soon as you walk into the building, there's this atrium, and you'll see all these little homes for birds hanging down from the atrium. This is an exhibit by the Museum of Infinite Outcomes. It's a rotating exhibit of human-crafted homes for birds. Each year, the museum puts out a call for art. Anybody can join in, and the submissions are then put into a rotating exhibition. It celebrates the times that people lend a hand to the natural world because living together with the birds is a compromise. So here we have different interpretations of a bird home, such as a retirement home for hummingbirds, a hand-turned wood bird home. We have a lot of painted gourds, some painted by children. Lots of different interpretations of what a human-crafted bird home is. We even have an artist that put together bird homes that she tried to weave herself like a bird. We have some more abstract interpretations. And I wanted to end on this particular piece because it's a brown-headed nuthatch box that was embellished by one of our Georgia Audubon members who's a master birder. He's also a big fan of the Van Halen rock band. And this was a memorial to Eddie Van Halen, the lead guitarist, who died late last year. In the next room, you walk in and there's this beautiful exhibit of carvings on an octagonal table.
This grouping of art is by a local artist. His name is Chris Wilson. And on this octagonal exhibit, Chris put together a bunch of wood sculptures, hand-carved wood sculptures that he created that depicted different wetlands birds. And these wetlands birds, he wanted to include some of the birds that were doing very well due to legislation surrounding wetlands conservation, and also to outline a couple of the birds that live in the wetlands that actually need more legislative help.
And looking at these more closely, you can see how incredibly detailed they are. Wood carvings, there's also some metal in the carvings, and they're hand painted. And he also includes reference to native plants. And most of Chris's work has a little surprise in it. Like you'll find a little tree frog right below that green heron. There's also some insects, and there's even one bird that's surrounded by pollution because it's been impacted by oil spills. Also in this room, you'll find Chris has created a couple of pieces that are homages to birds that are now extinct, such as the Carolina parakeet and the passenger pigeon. Then you go into the next room, a quiet little alcove, and Chris has a number of sculptures that are homages to Georgia birds of note that are in decline, such as the bobwhite quail, the eastern meadowlark, an ovenbird, the Georgia state bird, the brown thrasher, a rose-breasted grosbeak, a prairie warbler, and then this is a bluebird, which was in decline, but because of human help has come back, and the barn swallow, which is in decline right now. From that room, you walk into the main space of the gallery, and it's a beautiful open space. And we've got the work of a number of artists in this space. This shows you different views from that room. And it's easy, if you do go, it's easy to socially distance in this room. And masks are required. It feels like a very safe place. And this is the other weekend, we had some urban ecologists, a teen group there to do a tour of the show. So one of the first things you notice in this large room is this amazing montage of what looked to be a type of photograph. And these are made by Kate Brieky, who is here with us today. And I'll just briefly describe them because she's going to talk about them in more detail. But these are photograms, which are images made without a camera. The subject being these birds that have died, and they reference deaths due to some sort of human activity. They were simply laid on this light-sensitive photographic paper and exposed to light. The images that result become these ghostly shadows of the remains of these living creatures, burned into photographic paper with light and with love to make a lasting impression, the only document of their brief existence here on Earth. You can see all the different types of birds in Kate's exhibit. And then next to that elliptical exhibit of the photograms, there's this grid of birds. And here's the grid. This is also done by Kate. And these are hand-painted photographs of birds that hit windows. So a lot of these birds are actually birds that hit Atlanta skyscrapers. And Georgia Audubon has a program where they collect for educational and scientific purposes some of the birds that have died by hitting the Atlanta skyscrapers. And as part of this project, in the educational aspect, we shipped these birds out to Kate for her to photograph. and then beautifully hand color them and give them a new life. So on another side of the exhibit, you'll see this beautiful sculptural piece that is coming off of one of the walls.
This piece is a hand-carved assemblage by a local artist from Atlanta. His name is Chris Condon. And it's a depiction of a map of warblers migrating along the Atlantic flyway and the dangers that the migration represents.
One of the things that's really dramatic about this piece are the shadows that are created from this sculpture. The birds are mounted away from the wall, and it adds to the feeling of this flock of birds flying through the air on their migration path.
This is another piece by Chris Condon, and it's a sculpture made of old rusty pitchfork and some wood carving, and depicting meadowlarks and the issues that are surrounding meadowlarks and grasslands.
On one of the back walls, you'll see this monumental oil painting that at first glance looks like a complete abstraction. It's a painting by an artist from Pennsylvania, Patricia Griffin, and she's going to speak more about what this painting represents.
Movement and environment are very important to me in the work. This piece is part of a migration series, which the piece in 3 billion is as well. And I am a major conservationist and have always used my work as a little bit of a microphone to talk about the need for space for migrating animals, because they, need more, they need a global space.
Talking about migration, why don't you tell us a bit about the piece that you have in the 3 billion show?
That piece is snow geese migration, and in the February of 2020, I wish it was 19, they came through a place in western PA, Lancaster County, called Middle Creek. And this was property that was put aside in the 30s, I believe, to protect farmland for the geese to migrate through. And last year there were 125,000 geese. Wow. Well, I wanted it to be like, no way, that's impossible, because that's really what it felt like when it was happening. I mean, in the videos that I had taken, my husband was with, and he was doing video and I was still shooting. And if you can hear me just, screaming like, oh my God, I can't believe it. But when they lifted off, you actually felt this wind, and there was nothing specific that you saw at that moment, but you felt like you were part of something so monumental.
Turning from Patricia Griffin's piece, you'll notice this luminescent nest-like object hanging from the ceiling in the middle of the room. And it's a piece done by an artist out of Hawaii. She lives on the north shore of Oahu. Her name is Brittany Weiland, and she lives amongst a surfing colony and surfboard makers. And the nest is made out of discarded surfboard making materials. She'll tell you more about it here.
Originally, I kind of wondered if I was going to need to construct it, kind of wiring it together as I went, and then maybe put resin over the whole thing. But as I went, I was actually taking away all of the things that supported it. And as I was going, I realized you know, if I tied my hands together and used my mouth, maybe that would end up being more like a bird's experience. I'm watching videos of them weaving together these nests, and it's so much effort and so intricate, but it starts out so loose and delicate and ends up being this structure. And I didn't crawl in it, but I tried to make it the size that I could picture myself actually being in it. One of the things that I was really interested in when making the nest is the idea that it's scavenged from materials that are around you, that it's this sort of impermanent structure, but it's constantly being constructed from what came before it. There's this reflection and projection consistently moving forwards. And I guess as a message that it's sort of conveying is urging the viewer to consider the nests that they are, that have been constructed for them, that they are constructing. We're constantly building these nests and what they are actually nurturing, and considering the sort of complex ways that they're built, that ideas don't just appear out of nowhere, is that they are scavenged from around, and not just at an ideological level, but physically, the nests that we are building and for the next generation, what we're leaving, materials we're leaving them to work with. And the plastic not only speaks to the excess in plastic in the surfboard building industry, which is pretty rampant, but as society as a whole, that it's unsustainable. Essentially, that sort of word that's kind of become a little bit trendy, it means it can't continue.
Looking beyond Brittany's piece, you see this wall. We've got the work of two artists. The artist on the left is Pam Longobardi, and she's with us today. She and Wayne Sentiment will be talking about the piece right in the middle. And then on the right, we have the work of Eileen Doughty, and she's an artist, a quilting artist from Virginia. And one of the quilts is hanging against the wall, and it's a children's quilt. It was meant to speak to children, and it's called "Which Side Are You On?" And you'll see on the left side of the quilt, you have a yard that has non-native species, a free-roaming cat, some plastic flamingos, and not many birds. But then on the right side of the quilt, you'll see native species, water features, bird feeders. The little cat is in the house. Here's some of the details. She wanted children to be able to come and see and find different things in this piece. And then to the left of that is another quilt by Eileen Doughty. And this is a much more abstract quilt. And the first thing to notice are the colors, the way the colors go from these beautiful blues and greens on the left. And then as the quilt moves to the right, the colors get hotter and more desolate. So this piece is called Fast Forward. It speaks to worldwide increases in greenhouse gases, temperature, pollution, pesticide usage, deforestation, human population, and outdoor cat predation. The birds are subtle on the front until you look really closely. The background is quilted like graphs. Various ribbons and stitches indicate the decrease in birds caused by increases in environmental problems. A large bird is flying across with its wings position changing. Only a few birds remain on the right. The quilt is hung away from the wall to help you find the birds by looking at the black back fabric. And then to the left of Eileen's quilts are Pam Longobardi's pieces, and I'll just be speaking briefly about those since she's here with us. This piece that was on the left is called Disappearance of Wings. There are 8 copper portraits of bird extinctions that have happened in the 1900s. They are paired with mounted coffin handles whose decorative qualities are distinctly avian. Here's a close-up of 2 of the copper plates that are etched. And the one on the left is an ivory-billed woodpecker, which is extinct. And then the one on the right is a Guadalupe flicker. And you see at the top of that one, the date of its extinction. And then to the right of that is this Rainbows End in Paradise piece. And it's 490 plastic gliders found in albatross nests on Midway Atoll. And these are ghost objects that have a dismal afterlife in the non-human world. So you walk from the main gallery into this beautiful hallway with skylights and arches. And there's the work of 2 artists in this section.
And here we have 2 sculptures by Athens-based artist Mary Engel. And Mary creates these beautiful sculptures of wildlife. In this case, we have an owl and a red-winged blackbird. And they're made out of objects that she found at flea markets and antique shops and just general trash as well. And she assembles them into this wonderful montage of birds that she's very familiar with around her home.
This is the red-winged blackbird piece, and you can look closely and see buttons, and compass parts, and watch parts, other objects. Last but not least are some of my pieces, and I'll talk more about them here.
In this area of the building is some of my work that I created for the show. I'm not only the curator of the show, but I'm also an artist as well. And I work in paper. I don't use any paint. I create these heavily layered paper collages. And what I decided to do was to focus on different biomes of bird species that are in distress. I did a pollinator piece, a wood warbler piece, a red-winged blackbird piece, grassland bird, chimney swifts, and wetlands birds, such as the wood storks. And in these pieces, I asked the birds, well, if you had a choice in what kind of world you would like to live in, tell me and I'll create it for you. So I created these beautiful settings for the birds that are usually devoid of any mention of human activity in them.
So this first piece is the wood stork piece. I chose a lot of Japanese washi papers, layered those. It has a very Asian stork feel to it. This is my pollinators piece, and we've got a variety of different species of hummingbirds, and they're all happily living together in this idealized hummingbird world. This piece is my chimney swift piece. It's the only one that has a mention of human activity in it. And it's my chimney, because my husband and I live in a home that is a host to a bunch of chimney swifts in the summertime. This is the red-winged blackbird piece. The blackbirds are looking out over a marsh and calling out for their friends to join them. And this is the female red-winged blackbird. She looks so distinctively different than the males. This is the grassland piece. It's bobolinks and bobwhites. Zooming in, you'll see the bobwhite quail with a little nest down in the grasses. And then fluttering up above are some bobolinks. And this piece is called the Warbler Tree. And it's a peaceable kingdom of many of the different types of warblers that you will see in North Georgia and in Western North Carolina, where I do a lot of birding myself. So a show like this wouldn't be complete without a call for action. I worked with Georgia Audubon, and they put together this beautiful looping video called Bring Birds Back. And it gives people different solutions, different small solutions that everybody can make to help our declining bird populations. One of the most important things you can do is plant native species in your yard, native species of plants. And I think the second most important thing you can do is support the wonderful conservation groups like Georgia Audubon. They've been an amazing co-sponsor and partner in this show. So with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to first introduce Kate Brieky, who will then talk and do a presentation about her work. And then when Kate's finished, I'll then introduce Pam and Wayne. But as far as Kate, she is an internationally acclaimed and collected artist known for her richly hand-colored photographs of birds, flowers, and animals. She's originally from Adelaide, Australia, and she now lives in Tucson, Arizona. She's had 5 books published of her work by the University of Texas Press. In the last 40 years, Kate's work has appeared in more than 120 one-person exhibitions and in over 60 group exhibitions in the United States, France, Japan, Australia, China, and New Zealand. And in Atlanta, I am so privileged to represent Kate's work at my gallery, Brickworks Gallery. So thank you, Kate.
Thank you. Thank you. All righty, I'm going to share my screen. Thank you very much, Laura. Here we go. Desktop, share, play. All right, everyone can see that. So I'm very grateful to be in this wonderful show, and thank you also for inviting me here today. I'm just going to talk a little bit about myself, my work as an artist, and then specifically about the stuff that's in the show. I've actually been an artist for going on 40 years now, and all my work is about the natural world, which I find utterly fascinating and wonderful, and awe-inspiring and sad, of course. Lots of my work is about loss and death. I'm a photographer, but I alter images. I hand color using oil paint and sometimes pastel and pencil. And I also use alternative processes in photography. I've always been interested in blurring the lines between photography and painting and drawing. I love making images that are unique and more personal and subjective. And I guess I love the sensual nature of working with pigment. So everything I show you today is hand colored. Lots of it started as black and white images that I've added all the color to, that include the oil paint and the pencils. So again, they're much more like paintings than they are photographs in the end. And as I said, I've been doing this a very long time. My love of birds goes way back. I grew up in a country town in Australia on the coast here, the Southern Ocean. And I had a whole lot of family who were, that's me photographing a dead raven on the beach. But I had a whole lot of family who were rather eccentric and were always animal rescue people. They always had huge amounts of birds that, birds and animals that had been hurt. And this is, of course, long before it was an official thing. They just did it out of the goodness of their heart. And I used to visit them a lot. And I guess, you know, they were the ones who sort of taught me, you know, to have this great respect for all living things. And it was quite special going there because you'd always be attacked by very territorial magpies and you'd be run down by wombats. And it was quite amazing. Again, this is country town Australia. My father was a bird enthusiast, and there were always lots of reference books. We had kookaburras that nested in the eaves. He built them little nesting thingies, and we also had lots of very colourful parrots and cockatoos, lots of ducks and chickens. So this was all hugely influential to me growing up. And so later on, after I finished art school, one of the things I started doing, one of the huge projects, I made all of these human scale head and shoulder portraits of dead birds and obviously coloured them. I'll just read you this little bit and I'll show them to you as we go. When the trembling heart stops beating, what remains is a tiny, beautiful corpse. I make a portrait to commemorate that life, to express my regret and sorrow, and as a gesture towards all the little creatures whose lives and deaths happen around us without notice. I make these portraits larger than life, my size, so that we are on equal ground and so that we can meet each other eye to eye, and I can get to know every feather and preserve them long after their bodies are gone. This ended up being a book that Laura mentioned was published by University of Texas Press that was called Small Deaths. And this is a bad slide of the cover of it. This was in 2000, a long time ago now. So the 64 birds on the walls of the Hudgens are from a much larger series called Las Sombras, the Shadows. And as she mentioned there, and there were photograms of plants and animals that I made over about a 10-year period. And they ranged from the tiniest creatures, including, spiders and beetles and bats and mice, to much larger mammals, coyote and a deer and everything in between, snakes, birds, possums, rabbits, several hundred individual creatures in all. And I always hang them whenever they're shown in these sort of big installations. As I said, these are actually, a photogram doesn't use a camera, and Laura explained that the subject this is a jackrabbit about to be exposed. I haven't put the paper under yet because the door is open, and I'm about to just expose it to light from my enlarger. The subject just is laying down on the paper and exposed, and what you get is this negative shadow image that shows like variations in tone, and that depends on the transparency of the objects. So you get this beautiful aura happening because the light's going through the edges of the bulk of the mass of the creature through its fur. And of course this happens with the birds because they have transparent wings, or the light goes through them, translucent wings. So anyway, this particular form of photography was invented by Henry Fox Talbot, who is regarded as the father of modern photography, and they're also called photographic drawings, or as I said, photograms. And this also was a book of which we have at the gallery if anyone wants to go look at them. When Laura asked me to be in this exhibit, I got out all the photograms I had of birds and started arranging them and framing them. And I usually hang these myself, but I couldn't come because of COVID. So I made this scaled down model of the arrangement, and then numbered each piece and then packed each piece so that the person who hung them had a guide. And they did an amazing job. So it's pretty lovely to see it all exactly the way I pictured it. So the other work that she showed you are individual images of dead birds that have probably flown into windows. And as she also mentioned, I had the help of the Georgia Audubon Society, who sent me the birds to photograph that they'd collected. So here's some of them with their collection data, what the bird is and where and when, etc. So these all got shipped to me on ice, and I made images of them. So I actually was inspired by these 18th century drawings by this French biologist who was an illustrator of some note called Charles Le Sueur. And I just love these. These are, of course, drawings of jellyfish. This is an entire book of his beautiful illustrations of jellyfish. But what I loved about them was the now old stained aged paper with its foxing and its stained, and the fact that it had the genus species written in the corner, and that there was this lots of beautiful paper space because they were drawings. So I decided I wanted the birds to be like that. Specimens, here's another one, intricate drawings. So I basically photographed the birds. This is obviously a mockingbird, just straight down, on any surface at all, any plain surface, and And then in the computer, I actually added in, you know, what amount to sort of papery backgrounds. And then I tore and printed them on nice thick paper and then tore the edges and pinned them. So hopefully they have sort of a vintage feel. And then I also wrote the genus species down there in the bottom. So anyway, various different papery surfaces that are all, as I said, added in the computer afterwards. And then I go back in, as you can probably see, with pencil and do quite a lot of work, fine work, actually making them look more like drawings. So again, this is memorializing these little creatures that died prematurely at our hands. There's a beautiful poem from the 1950s called Death of a Bird, and it's written, I think it's A.D. Hope, and it's a really beautiful poem about a natural death. It's about a bird in its last migration when it gets too old to make the trip. And I just thought, you know, if we could all feel the same sort of sympathy for the little birds that, you know, die, as I said, at our hands. So no one writes poems about them, but I at least make images that memorialize them, which, as I said, has kind of been the theme of my entire art life. This is a Pyraloxia. I haven't colored this one yet, and I haven't written on it. This is a bird that's native to Arizona here, and they're part of the same family as cardinals. As you can see, they've got a crest. In fact, it's hard to tell the difference between a male Pyraloxia and a female cardinal until you hear them call. This is one that was sent to me, a warbler. And this is one of our beautiful flickers that live in the giant swallows. One of your native Georgian. And that's it, really. I think I've filled up my 8 minutes, so I'm going to stop sharing screen now. Where do I do that? Stop sharing. Okay, am I stop sharing? Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm gonna introduce Pam and Wayne. Pam, and I'll do it together since y'all are sort of speaking on the same topic. Pam Longobardi has been connected to water life from an early age. After discovering mountains of plastic on remote Hawaiian shores in 2006, she founded the Drifters Project, centralizing artists as cultural workers, activists, and researchers. Her studio-based work includes paintings, collage, photography, large-scale sculpture, installation, public actions, and performance. She is a winner of the prestigious Hudgens Prize, given out every 2 years. Longobardi has been featured in National Geographic, Sierra Magazine, The Weather Channel, multiple films, and in exhibitions around the world. She is the Oceanic Society's Artist in Nature, where she co-leads expeditions to remote and beautiful places, working with participants and communities in addressing plastic and its environmental impact. She currently lives in Atlanta, Georgia, and is a Regents Professor at Georgia State University. And we also have with us Wayne Sentman, who is the Director of Conservation Travel Programs at the Oceanic Society, the oldest marine-focused nonprofit in America. Wayne completed his master's degree at Harvard University, conducting research on marine plastic pollution impacts on albatross on Midway Atoll. At the Oceanic Society, Wayne designs mission-driven expeditions that support conservation of marine species and habitats, and that strive to deliver transformational experiences to motivate pro-ocean behavioral changes. Pam Longobardi and Wayne Sentman have collaborated on a series of plastic-free international marine expeditions and partnered on art exhibits that promote public awareness of marine pollution and its sources. And I thank both of you so much for being with us today and for being part of this show.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Georgia Audubon, for having us and for supporting the show. It's so important to have art exhibitions like this that remind people that we're not the only creatures on Earth. I'm going to just talk very briefly about my work in the show, and let me share my screen and get started with this one. You can see me, right? My screen?
Yep. Yes.
Okay, great.
It's loading. Yeah, just give it a second. It's loading. There it is.
Yeah. I'm going to just talk a little bit about the piece that Laura mentioned first that's in the show. And it's kind of interesting for me to show this piece because I actually made it in 1993. And so it was originally made for a show called Bird Space, which was another exhibition that was, looking at human relationships to birds. And I've been interested in making most of my artwork about our fraught relationship with the natural world for most of my career. And it's taken different forms. But at this point, I was really involved in looking at bird extinctions. And it came from a trip in Hawaii that I started noticing there were lots of very current bird extinctions. And I think it just struck me, having been a scientific illustrator for Jack Horner, and where I was drawing dinosaurs, that most people actually think of extinction in relationship to the ancient past. And of course, we now know that we're in the middle of the 6th mass extinction, and the 5th one being the dinosaurs. But I was thinking about that, I think before that was even really on people's radar. And so I found this quote about a flock of passenger pigeons from 1614. And it read, "Myself have seen 3 or 4 hours together, flocks in the air, so thick that they even have shadowed the sky from us." And it just struck me, sorry, that's my dog, and she's, for sure someone's breaking in the house or something. And then it struck me that, when I looked at the extinction date, the official extinction date for the passenger pigeon as a species, that it was this brief bracket of time from 1614 to 1914, just 300 years it took for humans to annihilate an incredibly plentiful species. And so even the 6 and the 9 kind of form this parenthetic bracket around time. And I wanted people to think about that and think about what we can do when we don't think. And so in the initial iteration of this, I actually paired this with a weather balloon that included that quote. It had a projection by slides. And it starts with, they were kind of extractions of angel wings. And this had to do also with that. Recently at that point in time had read that something like 50% of people believed in angels, and it was in Time magazine. And I really looked deeply into the history of representation of angels, and then extracted the wings from Renaissance paintings and whatnot. Because it was very poignant to me that this referent of this holy being was a bird, and yet at the same time, we were causing bird extinctions. All of these are portraits of birds that had gone extinct since the 1900s, and from just varying parts of the world, but there were lots of ones from North America. And I had them paired with these coffin handles because they struck me as this kind of almost like an insufficient monument, that I could, with all my care and lovingness, make these portraits of these birds as a memorial. And yet that was just so insignificant compared to the loss of the actual species. There's the ivory-billed woodpecker and this particularly avian looking coffin handle. Fast forwarding to 2005, 2006, I was struck by another thing where I think humans and the natural world came into collision, which was plastic. And my dad actually worked for Union Carbide when I was young. So he would bring home these experimental things that they were working on, and they actually, you know, we saw like these two ingredients being put together, and he made, you know, great stuff, expansion foam, in my kitchen as a child. But it really wasn't until 2005 when I was on a trip to the south point of the big island of Hawaii that I saw what was happening with this material, how it had escaped like a genie from a bottle, and we did not know what we were doing with it, and we were continuing to produce hundreds and thousands of tons of this material, and really not taking care for where it went. So I started to collect this material. I started to utilize it as my art material, and there were lots of other associations with you know, human-caused extinctions, even in the materials themselves, because these are all pieces of drift net gill nets, which are these massive nets that the factory fishing industry utilizes to capture entire, just, you know, an entire bait ball of species, which are the target species, and then oftentimes are also capturing and killing lots of other bycatch. So I continued to make more and more pieces that were kind of talking about, you know, our relationship to the natural world. This one in particular had to do with the Deepwater expansion, the Deepwater disaster, which was the Deepwater Horizon, thank you, disaster that was in the Gulf of Mexico. It absolutely changed that ecosystem there. It's one of the closest beaches to where I live. And I made more and more pieces. This is actually my Hudgens Prize exhibition that was in the Hudgens Center. The Crime of Willful Neglect, which had over 500 pieces of black plastic. Because I don't think they ever really were held accountable for that crime. And I just explored varying forms. All of this material I pick up myself and with volunteers. So this is actually removed from the natural environment and then put back into social space so that we can look at it and think about it. And I've been doing this all over the world. This is something I did with Oceanic Society as their artist in nature, which is leading into Wayne's wonderful addition to this talk today. This is Armilla, Panama. It's a very, very remote part of Panama, right in the narco trafficking area next to Colombia. This is a place that has a very prosperous indigenous group there called the Gunayala, and they are autonomous. They own the land, they have their own language, they have their own sort of social structure, and there's no electricity, there's no roads, there's no municipal services. So this is what their beaches look like. And it's also the home of one of the main ancestral homes for leatherback sea turtles. So I was down there working with them, and we did a project where we covered up these electric or solar lights that had been put up by a well-meaning NGO, but they were actually causing tremendous problems for the turtles because they would go into the village instead of back out to sea when they finished laying their eggs. And this is, as you can see, this nearly 2,000-pound turtle is very far from the beach here, and we're trying to figure out what to do about that to get her back in the sea. This was the work that I made from that trip. That was the cover of Sierra Magazine. And we've also done projects in other locations in Belize. We did several mass cleanups and used humans and plastic together to broadcast messages about our sort of fragile relationship and the fact that we were now in the 6th mass extinction. And the last piece that I'm going to talk about, of course, is the Rainbow's End, and this the sad end for this albatross chick. It's been fed all of this plastic by its parents, And you'll notice in the center that near its heart is a brilliant red lighter. And for some reason, that is one of the most common things that they are fed. Of course, they can't live when their stomachs are packed and impacted with plastic objects, which quite a few of them do not fledge because of that. And Wayne had been, oh, sorry, that was another piece from Belize. But Wayne had been working out there on Midway, and he had access to a mass of these lighters. And I said, wow, I really want to make a piece with those. And so I just envisioned this as, you know, paradise, where, you know, the most remote part of the Hawaiian Islands, people don't really get there very often. And yet we are, you know, providing lots and lots of our plastic garbage to that place. And so each one of these were taken from an albatross nest, and they were collected over time by groups of volunteers. And then I arranged them into this, you know, sort of a rainbow, but of course it's also a reference to the twisted entrails of the poor chicks that do not survive. And Wayne is going to tell you a lot more about the albatross, which he has personally worked with and studied and gotten to know. And I hope sometime I get to see those amazing birds in person as well. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. Hope you make it out there. Hello, everybody. I'm going to try to, sorry, I'm trying to share my screen here. Hang on one second. Okay, great. Well, thank you, everybody. And I'll try to run through my slides pretty quickly because I know we're a little low on time here. But I wanted to talk to you about a place that Pam mentioned that I've been very lucky to go to, which is Midway Atoll. And also just wanted to give you a little background of how Pam and I know each other, which she talked a bit about. But we've worked together on a bunch of different expeditions and for about the last 15 years, and really trying to bring this idea of using art to talk about plastic pollution and sort of get people to creatively envision solutions to it rather than getting depressed by it. So we've done some expeditions to Komodo, to Palau, and we have one coming up in about a year to Raja Ampat. As Pam mentioned, we collected lots of lighters at Midway Atoll, which she used in her piece. And this is just, this is one day out in the field doing surveys. I could put all this in my pocket, and when I got back, I would take it out. And I didn't know why I was collecting it, but I'm glad I did. And Pam was able to use it. And this is typically where I would find it. So this is a chick that didn't fledge, most likely because of the plastic. And you can see in this particular chick, it's decayed. And those are the lighters that were left behind. So this chick had 3 lighters inside in addition to other plastic. And this is sort of a little more descriptive photo, sort of reminiscent of Chris Jordan's type photos of the bird in place there. Midway is a pretty amazing place. It has a long history, as many people here may know, from the Battle of Midway. And it's an atoll that's about 5 miles across. There are 3 main islands, which are in the bottom of the picture there, and they encompass about 1,500 acres. One of the other things to know about Midway is, and the whole Hawaiian archipelago, is it's the most remote place in the world that you can be. It's the furthest away from any other body of land that you can be. So while we think of it as sort of, it should be pristine because it's out in the middle of nowhere, it's actually, what we find is that's not true. And Midway is part of the Northwest Hawaiian Islands. So they're a chain of islands that stretch up north of Kauai and stretch for about 1,200 miles. And they're now part of the Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument. And that's, it's one of the largest fully protected marine protected areas in the world. And this just gives you an idea on a US map about how big that is. The main Hawaiian Islands are down there on the right-hand side, and the monument is in the darker blue, stretching from Las Vegas to Dallas, if we were to impose it over land. And Midway's, it's a gorgeous place. It's a wonderful place to visit. It has amazing beauty above and below land. Lots and lots of albatross. There's about 2 million albatross that nest there. About 500,000 nesting albatross, which translates into about 2 million albatross. And for a large part of the year, from November to June, it is just covered in albatross everywhere you look. And albatross are, I kind of equate them more to like little puppies than what you think of when you think of birds, in the sense that they have lots of personality. They walk right over to you. They try to untie your shoelaces, and they like to really, they seem to enjoy interacting with people, trying to find someone to dance with. At Midway, there's 3 types of albatross: the Laysan albatross, black-footed albatross. These are the 2 main types of North Pacific albatross. And then there's another albatross called the short-tailed albatross, which is characteristic of that sort of bubblegum bill. We've been able to count the nests over the years, and the good thing about Laysan and black-footed albatross is their populations seem to be stable, and that has a lot to do with the fact that they're long-lived, and also there's been a lot of work done to take out invasive plants and open up habitat, which is on the top picture is something called golden crownbeard, and on the bottom is the golden crownbeard has finally been thwarted and opens up a lot more nesting space. Unfortunately, these islands are, as we said, further away from anything in the world, other pieces of land, but yet they're covered in our trash. And this is basically where away is. So when you say you're throwing something away, here's some pictures of away. And this is also where all these chicks are nesting that Pam was talking about earlier. And again, we can see the what happens when these adults bring back the plastic and feed it to their chicks. Also, the beaches and the sand is made up of lots of microplastic as well, as that plastic breaks down. One of the reasons that we're seeing an increasing amount of plastic in our oceans is because every year we're increasing the amount of plastic we produce, and we're on the path to producing about 400 million tons in another couple of decades. In terms of plastic in albatross, it's not a new phenomenon. There's been plastic in albatross since the 60s when people have been going there. But as of about the middle 2000s, 100% of the albatross have plastic in them in some level. This is a photo that Susan Middleton did for National Geographic, and this just shows a bird that she found, and then they necropsied and took all the plastic out. And you can see this individual had 272 pieces of plastic. And here's the picture from on the left-hand side from 1966, and on the right-hand side, one that I took in 2010. And you can see it's a pretty similar picture, but the loads of plastic are increasing, and that's because we keep producing more plastic. We use it for single uses. We don't always dispose of it properly, and it ends up in the ocean, gets into these currents, and forms what's known as the gyres. And in this case, there's 5 gyres in the world where this plastic is accumulating. This is tracks of albatross from satellite tags, and it shows where they feed. And they're feeding right along those big patches of garbage, the North Pacific garbage patch, which is why they're sort of a focal animal for this problem. While they're feeding out at sea, they're picking up this plastic and bringing it back to their chicks. So in addition to feeding squid to the chicks and flying fish eggs, they're also feeding plastic. And it's estimated that each year those albatross adults landfill about 5 tons of plastic at Midway from picking it up in the ocean about 1,000 miles away from Midway and bringing it back and feeding it to their chicks. And this is a problem for chicks because chicks are not able to regurgitate until they get to a certain age. So all that plastic sits in their gut. The chicks that are successful at fledging throw up a bolus. And when you pick through the bolus, again, we see all this plastic that's in there. And this is actually a chick that successfully left. And that plastic is bad, you know, both for the mechanical problems that it can puncture things in the chick, or it can just make them not beg for food. But it also picks up chemicals while it's floating in the ocean. And those are organic pollutants like PCP and other organopollutants that can have toxic effects. And one of the things that I did when I was studying plastic was looking at heavy metals in these different types of plastic. These are all pieces that had been ingested by an albatross. And we found that some of these pieces of plastic were able to leach off heavy metals at toxic amounts. So I'm gonna cut it off there because I know, as I said, our time is a little short, but I did want to leave you with a little bit of hope. This is from this year out on Midway, and actually just a few weeks ago. This is Wisdom's chick. Wisdom is the oldest banded bird that we know of, that is about 69 to 70 years old, we estimate. And so this is a little bit of hope that even though all that plastic's out there, if we can do something about it in the near term, these birds seem to be able to currently weather the storm, and that's because they're long-lived. If you really want to do something positive, we run an Adopt an Albatross program, which you can join, and it'll provide you field updates for the season, and you can learn more about these albatross out in the Northwest Hawaiian Islands and be part of helping with solutions to solving some of these problems. So with that, I will stop, and I appreciate everybody for joining in, and sorry for the rush, but I just want to make sure we got a little bit of overview. And thank you, Laura, for inviting us, and Pam for help bringing me here to share. So thank you.
Well, thank you all so much. That was just amazing. And seeing those pictures of the plastic, it's just horrible to see, but what an amazing walkthrough. We do have a few questions. If you have questions, can you please ask them in the Q&A, and I'll try to relay them to the presenters. Laura, first, can you speak to how long this exhibit will be running, and do you know what the hours are at the Hudgens Center?
The exhibit will run through April 26th. The Hudgens is not open on Sundays and Mondays. And then on most days, I believe the hours are 10 to 5, except for on Saturday, it's 10 to 4. But you can always check their website. I think I'm directionally correct in most of those hours.
Okay. Somebody said first they want to thank you for the wonderful program, and I'll thank all the artists for the beautiful and thoughtful exhibition. The question for Laura: what is it like to be a curator and an artist at the same time? How did this duality impact your curating process?
Oh gosh, it wasn't easy. I'll put it that way, because I'm having to sort of manage a lot of other things other than just my work, and having to put the business side of my brain to work as well as the creative side. So, but it was exhilarating, and it was fun, and it was worth all the effort. Yes, I guess it did impact the way I thought about the show. I wanted to treat all the artists fairly and with respect, and give everybody the most opportunity they had to show their work in their story in its best light. And so I'm sort of having to get into the heads of all the different artists and figure out what works best for their work.
Okay, I have a question for Kate. Kate, what happens to the bodies of the animals and birds after you finish photographing them?
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I'm sending the ones back to the Audubon, Georgia Audubon, that they loaned me. They were just on loan. But the others I just bury. I give them good heathen burials.
And I will tell you that Georgia Audubon, we have permits with, we have permits from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to possess the dead birds. And then we have arrangements with several universities around the United States. And we share the, like we did for Kate, we box them up and send them on dry ice and share them with these universities. And they use them for study skins for their biological sciences classes and stuff. Does anybody else have any other questions? I would encourage you, if you have an opportunity to go up and see this exhibit, it really is jaw-dropping and amazing. And I'd like to thank all of these artists for joining us this afternoon and for giving you a virtual tour. I've seen we've had people from the West Coast and got somebody from Maine commenting. So we really do have, excuse me, a nationwide audience. But I will close by saying that our next webinar is on our next monthly meeting is on Sunday, March 28th at 3:30. It's another free event, and we're going to have Deja Perkins talking about equity and birding and does where we go birding matter. So I hope you all will join us for that event. Pardon me. Anyway, thank you all for coming. And if we have no more questions, we'll end the webinar. You all go enjoy this beautiful day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.